Hi, I'm Sophie Hannah.
And I'm Nishi Rose. Hello and welcome back to episode 73 of Ethnically Speaking, the show where we discuss issues affecting the UK's highly melanated communities, from pop culture to current affairs and everything in between. Now, you might notice there is one of our fellow hosts missing this week, Mona. She has unfortunately lost her voice, but she will be back, so do not worry. Hopefully in the next couple of episodes, she'll have regained the ability to speak. But as you know, we always keep it 100. And today we're talking about how to wisely invest and spend your money. So Netflix has just released a new show, Mortgage or Marriage, Marriage or Mortgage. And this show is about following cash-strapped couples as they decide whether to spend their life savings on buying a house or having the wedding of their dreams. So I want to know, if you had the choice, would you spend your life savings on your wedding or on a house? What are the pros and cons of each of those decisions? And have we exaggerated in society and in pop culture the importance of making a choice between either of these things?
So, I've watched Marriage or Mortgage. I've binge watched the whole show. I loved it, to be honest. I really did. I think it was just a ridiculous premise because when I first saw it, I'm like, obviously no one is going to choose like a marriage. Obviously no one's going to choose the wedding. But the majority did. The majority chose a wedding, and for some people, it was people who literally had children, were living in a box flat. One person didn't have a washing machine and they had to wash their clothes at their mum's house and they still chose wedding. Like, it was just insane. But for me, would I choose marriage or mortgage? I've done both, and looking back, I would choose mortgage if I had to choose between the two. I had a beautiful wedding, like we had the best time, but it really is just one day. And if I really thought about which one I was gonna invest in long term, for me it would have been the mortgage. Now, in terms of pros and cons of like weddings, I'm gonna be quick because I don't want to talk too much. But a pro of a wedding is that you get to stand before all the people you love and declare your love and your commitment to somebody. So that's a big pro. One of the cons is, like I said, it's over in 24 hours and sometimes there's warring families and it's a lot of stuff to navigate. So it's a lot. And in terms of, what was the last question? So you asked, is there pressure to, have a wedding or a pile of bricks? I think there still is. I think there's pressure on both. I think there's pressure to have a wedding, and I don't even think it's an expensive wedding. I think it's just the wedding that somebody wants to have. That's the pressure that I felt. It wasn't so much what other people wanted it to be. It was more so, this is my vision for my wedding. This is the vision that I have. Luckily, my husband came along with that vision and got on board with it. So we was able to kind of move towards that. But I think in terms of the pile of bricks, I think from a Black Caribbean background, a house having a mortgage is seen as some sort of security. Like if you have that, like you're secure, you have somewhere to have your family. So I think there is pressure to still have that.
Interesting. So I do agree with you in a sense. But I guess, okay, so one thing that like my mom has always said to me is she wishes that she was born now, or she was, I guess, sort of a millennial born 35 years after she was actually born back in 1958. Because she says that actually, her most important thing when she was growing up was quite similar. She was always taught that having a house, having a mortgage should always be her priority. And she was a homeowner at the age of something crazy now, like 22 or 23 or something. And I think her entire flat cost like £15,000 or something, we all know these stories. But she says that on the flip side, she, like, as a result, she's always been tethered in one place. She's never done things that we have the freedom to, like travel or sublet, I guess, if you were renting, or any of those things. The house has always defined where she's based, where all of her money is basically invested into, and that's her asset. And that's, if she needed money, she'd have to sell a house. And so she needed sort of more cash or whatever, which in one way is great because you have the freedom to do that. But she says that she's felt trapped for a long time as a result of that. But at the same time, I'm also aware that I'm definitely not married. And I also don't own a house. So it's difficult for me to kind of know. But in theory, saying everything I've just said, I think that, if you have a long-term investment that actually does appreciate in value across the years, so you're putting in X amount, but actually what you're really paying for, in my view, is a return on your investment, more money. For that reason, I'd always choose a house rather than the wedding, because the wedding, as you say, like, it's temporary, it ends, and then you've lost lots of money. It's not an investment in that same way.
Do you know, I think it's really interesting what you said in regards to your mum feeling tied down and weighed down by her mortgage, because I get it. I'm someone that I rented before I got married, and I loved renting. I adored renting. Every problem that came up wasn't my problem. That was my landlord's problem. And literally anything broke, I'm like, the meter's gone. This is wrong with the toilet, the kitchen. Like, I really loved that. The thing that I got afraid of when my husband and I bought our home last year was like, I'm like, everything is our responsibility. And yes, the mortgage usually is cheaper than renting, but then you've got to get house insurance and then contents insurance and all these other stuff that just start to pile on when the house becomes your responsibility. And it does tether you to one place. You're right, it does, because unless you're going to rent, which you can do, like, you have to, you're kind of stuck in that base. And if you want to up and, go to Costa Rica for a couple of months, you have to think about what's going to happen to the mortgage, like who's going to pay that. So I think there's definitely pros and cons to each. And I think that's the really beautiful thing about the intergenerational gaps and thinking, is that what was good for our parents in terms of this is your security, this is your piggy bank. Now you can be like, well, actually, that's the thing that's going to tie me down. And if I want to live a life of travel and up and move and this and that, maybe buying isn't the thing for me. So I can understand that. The thing that scares me is getting to retirement age and still renting, and then being like, you don't have a job, you're too old for one. Where's that money going to come for rent for the rest of your life? So that's the thing that really scares me about renting forever.
I actually do agree with you on that, because I think also, yeah, if you're talking about like your safety investments, or actually like this fear, especially now, like even before the last 18 months or whatever, when, we're being told all this stuff about the next 30, 40 years of our lives are going to be paying back all this debt we've accumulated. That is obviously a really pressing fear. But I guess if that fear wasn't there, if you knew somehow, so say you get married like in your early 30s, you still have, because you probably won't be able to retire till 80 or so by the time we've aged that far, or say even say 70 is now the retirement age, for example, around there. There's still many more years to, I guess, accumulate money and savings that can sort of see you through those last years of your life. But I guess, like, if you had to choose, like, sort of instinctively, knowing that you would be able to, regardless, pay for those years, which would you have chosen if you had to make that decision as somebody who's had the wedding and has a house?
Would I choose marriage or mortgage? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good question. I'd probably, on that premise, I'd probably choose marriage. Yeah, I'd choose marriage, because I'm like, well, if I'm just going to rent forever, we might as well spend this money on the marriage. I mean, on the wedding day, should I say. And then we can just save and accumulate whatever we want if we want to, rent and just continue on as we are. I actually read this really interesting article that's saying that they're probably going to have to raise pension costs or pension weekly payments by the time our generation becomes retirees, because they're saying the society, the government, austerity, whatever we want to call it, they've made it so expensive or so difficult to buy. There's going to be a large percentage of people who won't be able to buy a home in their lifetimes. And then when they get older, the pensioners' wage or their weekly allotment of money isn't enough to cover their living expenditures. So they're going to have to up it, because they haven't been able to buy through no fault of their own, but because it was impossible to buy within the financial, the economic climate. So they were saying there's a reason for the government to be making it easier for people to buy a home. So it's very interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens in 40 years' time.
Also, I have a question to you. So with your wedding, when you say that your husband accepted your vision, what was your vision? And like, do you feel that like it cost you much more than you expected? Or did you, like, how did you plan it, I guess, like financially, as that's kind of those terms? And was it like the wedding of your dreams? And how?
Do you know, that's a very good question. So, in terms of price, when I was dating my husband, like, I think I was the only woman that he probably really considered marrying. I think before that, he was too young. He was trying to get started in his career. He was studying. And I think he got to an age where he was just like, yeah, I should really be thinking about getting married. So, but I don't think he'd actually thought about the nuts and bolts of actually how much a wedding was going to cost. So when we were dating, he goes to me, oh, well, if we get married, it's not going to cost us more than 10 grand. I was like, uh-huh. I was just like, the average cost of a wedding is like £27,000 in the United Kingdom. And he was like, what? And it's gone up now. I've read to 30K. It's very expensive. As soon as you're like, oh, so I'm looking for a venue. Sure, for a wedding. Oh, let me get the wedding prices for you. Let me just bring that. It gets crazy out here. So in terms of having the wedding of my dreams, no. It was very close. Wedding of my dreams probably would have been in Italy. In like not a vineyard, but maybe in a country manor, outside tables, like probably things like that. But in terms of Jonathan getting on board with my vision, I wanted to get married because I'm Christian and my husband is a minister. A lot of the people in our friendship circles, they get married in churches because we're very religious. And I was very clear on, I don't want to get married in the church. I'm like, I see the inside of the church every week. Like, it's not special. I'm not one of those people who gets married like, I want to have a big white wedding in the church. Like, there is no glamour for me in that, because I'm just like, this is like my weekly occurrence. So I said to him, I really want to get married outside. I want to get married in nature. I wanted to get married in greenery. That's what I really wanted. And he was just like, okay, let's do that. So he was from the Midlands. I was from London. And then we had to talk about, well, where are we going to get married? And then we decided to just find somewhere completely different to get married in neither place where we were situated. Because we're like, all of our people are going to have to travel anyway, because all his friends were in the north, my friends were in the south. Then we got married in Devon. And I didn't want my wedding to be just a one-day thing, because I'm like, the day goes so quickly. So it was like a long weekend. It span over 3 days. So those things were things that I really wanted that we were able to do. We had just the best Caribbean food ever. Like, honestly, it was the best. And then I love burgers, and then we had nighttime burgers. So we had this guy come up, he did gourmet burgers, and then he did, it was just really, really great. Like, we got to do pretty much everything we wanted to do. There's only one thing I regret having at the wedding, and then looking back, I'm like, I probably wouldn't have paid for that. But yeah, uplighting. So we got these lights that lit up the trees in the garden where so we got married, and it was got married outside, and then the reception was like an orangery, and we had uplighters to light outside the orangery. And then we didn't realize, I don't even think I told Jonathan this, I didn't realize that the building already had uplighters, and we didn't know, because obviously we'd only gone to see it in the daytime. So we paid to get extra uplighters, which we didn't actually need. And I fought him on this. He didn't want them, and I was like, please, I just really want the uplighters. I really want the uplighters. And there was just no point to them whatsoever. So that was like 400 and something pounds down the toilet. But apart from that, pretty happy with all the decisions that we made.
I mean, that wedding sounds absolutely amazing.
Thank you. Do you know what? We had the best time. We had the best time. So I'm very mindful, if people have the money, do the wedding. Have a great wedding. It's when you have the wedding, and I've had people have paid, spent 5 years paying off their wedding. I'm not interested in that. That's no. So.
You know what, I've been to some amazing, truly amazing weddings that sound you know what I mean? Similar to what you're describing. Everything makes sense. It's super well orchestrated. But it's always, I guess almost like you're saying as well, it's always my friends who already have a plan to get the house. And now that they also are homeowners and have got married. I think there are very few people I know who, there are other friends of mine who don't have a plan to own a home and have had simpler weddings. And those have also been super fun, I think the whole thing about, we talk about the dream wedding, it's almost like you're saying, okay, this is your vision. This is what you want to spend. It's still you're still spending a long weekend with loads of people in an amazing place. Even if it's not £1 million wedding, Instagram style, right? And so I think there's now, what makes an amazing wedding, I guess that's the question. Like, what makes an amazing wedding is actually like the atmosphere, the food, and the location. And also it's much more to do with those intangible things. And it's not really, I don't think anyone ever goes to, I went to one really expensive wedding in my life. And it was a friend of mine who is in very far away in a different country, so I know she doesn't watch the show. And they must have spent, like, even the conversation at this wedding was how much did this couple spend? Because this was a few years ago. So I think it was 3 years ago, we were 26. And they had one of like the fanciest locations in the whole of London. It started in this church. So it was a church wedding. Then there was a champagne reception in the church. Then there were double-decker buses that took you to this very fancy central London location. There's more champagne on this bus. When you arrived there was a jazz band to greet you and an unlimited like cocktail reception, like canapes. So by the time it got to 4 o'clock, because there was very little food available up until this time, but there'd been 4 drinks reception, and obviously like no one's going to drink before the church service because it's in the morning, or eat properly rather. Like everybody in this, like there were people I'd never even seen had one drink before who were like comatose on the floor. Like the atmosphere at this thing was raucous, and this was like so expensive. Then the guy comes out with the gong, and you process through into this like dignitaries hall, presided over by this dignitary, and there are the speeches. But by this time, as I said, by the time the main course had come out, there'd also been at these tables like wine, like few glasses of wine, everything. Like no one could see, no one could speak. Then after this meal happens, you go outside. There's another cocktail reception named after the bride and the groom. Then there was an after party at like one of these big like central London private members clubs. And like, I will say, because I knew a lot of the guests there, that's what made it like super fun. But actually the excess of all this stuff, it was completely overwhelming because there were also activities. So, like you come out of dinner, it was actually like nobody knew what to do because like it felt like, like medieval tapestries. And you see like those gremlin characters who have like huge heads, like bloated and red, and like these little legs. Everybody at this reception, by the time they'd drunk and eaten so much, looked like these gremlins. And like your whole body was like tight and red, and like everyone felt super ill. But you come outside and there's things for everybody to do. It was just like, it was too much. And like the thing was that like, it was amazing, as I say, for spending time with the friends, but the question was how much was spent. And I think if you're asking that question as well, like, it was from shock. It wasn't from amazement. It was from this was just far too much. And I feel like if you just looked at the Instagram photos, which I think is often what drives a lot of these weddings, it looks like the most amazing wedding of all time. But actually, it was like sick making. I don't know. But
do you know what,
Nushi? Also one person.
That's such an important point because I've been to some weddings that the pictures look great, but the wedding was there. Like it was just dead. Things didn't go to plan. It just didn't go very well. And I think it's very, and I think that's one thing I realized with weddings is that you can put as much money into it as you want, but you actually have no idea how the day is going to go. You don't know if the buzz and that atmosphere, because that is what's going to make it. Like you don't want a wedding that's just quiet and just dead because it's just boring. It's just really, really boring. And I've gotten to the point, like, I know friends, because we go to churches in summer, gosh, there is a wedding all the time. And people are just like, I'm sick of going to weddings. They're all the same. They're kind of cookie cutter. And it has to have something about it. It has to have that je ne sais quoi to kind of make it really interesting. So I understand that about putting lots of money into it. But I've heard weddings of people who didn't put a lot of money into it, if anything, to the point where the guests turned up at the reception and they weren't told that there wasn't food for the guests. They're like, there's only food for the bridal party, and the guests had waited like 3 hours for the couple to go and take pictures in the local park, and no one had told them that they weren't going to get fed. And it's just
I think
there's this wedding. I know, right? There's this wedding etiquette. Do you know? You can't do them sort of things. Like people also who will invite you to the church but not to the reception. I was very adamant I'm not doing that. Like if you were not invited to the reception, you're just not coming. I'm not going to make you get dressed up, come to the ceremony, and then you're going to be like, I'm not going to feed you. No. So, it's very, weddings get very political.
Okay, what do you think about so I have only been to, I think, 2 weddings in my life where I was just invited to the reception. Of course, I still attended. But also, I mean, I feel like every single person I know is now married. So I've been to so many weddings with no +1 alone. But I always go to the ceremony because I kind of enjoy it, then the reception. 2, what I believe were good friends of mine, invited me in recent years just to the reception. And I didn't know that there was a ceremony. And I arrived there, and these were in, again, like really nice like locations. And I got there, and then suddenly loads of people I already knew had been milling around and stuff. And they'd be like, where were you? And I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, oh yeah, all day we've been doing this, we've been doing henna, we've been doing like all these different activities. And it was just unspoken between me and the bride, because on both of these occasions it was the bride who was my friend. And I feel like that has severely damaged a couple of really good relationships of mine. Because, I mean, I realize we're going completely off topic, but what do you think about this? Am I just overreacting? I was genuinely hurt. And then the worst thing is you have to sit through the reception, and like one of these receptions, I didn't have a name thing. And like, I had like obviously given gifts, like dressed up, like traveled. And they just put me, there was like a table, thankfully I knew a few people on this table, but they just put me on a table like, oh yeah, this is for the overflow.
I'm sorry, do you know what, Nushli, like, weddings get very political. They do. Trying to cut down that guest list is no joke. Now, I'm very lucky, but maybe not unlucky. I'm not sure. I wouldn't say that I have like a million friends. And like most of the people at our wedding were people who in our church community. But because I was in between churches at the time, so literally I'd left one church because, I just left one church and I wasn't really going to another church at the time. I'd sporadically go to churches. So I hadn't built up a community church base. Whereas my husband had a lot of people in church. So for me, when it came to the guest list, I'm like, I haven't seen these people in months. I can legitimately not invite them to the wedding. Whereas for him, I had to end up giving him guests. Like we had the guest list and then we had to split it down the middle. And it was 150 guests, 75. You do it what you will. But I had to end up giving him like 10, 15 of my seats because he just could not cut his list down. And then you get excited when people can't come because like, oh great, we've got a seat back now. And then we can add the other, we had lists on lists of people to invite. Now, in terms of like what your friends did to you, I understand it, but I'm not here for it. Like, I get very upset. And I need to work on this. I get very upset if someone who I'm close to doesn't invite me to their wedding, or who I presume I'm close to, and then I realize we're not close at all because I couldn't make it to the first list of the wedding. And it can be very hurtful. I've actually had conversations with people like, I'm really upset that I never got invited to your wedding because like we're family. And I thought that we were closer than that. And then it's like, oh, it's a small wedding. And I'm like, but you were at my wedding. Like, what do you mean? So
I paid for you.
it gets very political, and it has to come down to, at the end of the day, I have to grow and be more mature and be like, do you know what? It's your wedding day. You can invite to it whoever you want to. But I think it is a reflection of relationships. And I do believe a lot of weddings sever relationships, make them more tense, or break them up over time because, you can feel like you're in there, you're not, and you're just like, I'm not going to travel hundreds of miles, buy you a nice present to come and dance. Nope, not doing it.
I mean, I completely agree. I was just thinking speaking of like the cost of weddings, there was one wedding I went to about 2 years ago, and it must have been like insanely cheap. So basically, like this girl, I used to work with her. She was like an EA like in my department, and so she was really good friends with like quite a few of us in the office, and so she invited us all to her wedding. We didn't know anyone there. We also went to the hen do. It was really nice, but the wedding itself was in a kind of like conference centre, like on the outskirts of London, really far from like anywhere. And instead of like food and drink, they kind of like self-catered themselves. So they brought like boxes of like different like alcohols, wines, spirits, whatever. And then also they seem to have catered a lot of the stuff themselves as well. But it was honestly one of the most fun weddings I've been to, whether or not like that was legal due to the hiring terms of the venue, because I definitely don't think it was. But it was so much fun. And again, I'm thinking it comes back to that thing, like I knew everybody at my table. It wasn't like there had to be small talk, there had to be anything. Like when, I think for guests, which I guess is a different thing, but I think for guests, the enjoyment from the wedding is, do I know people? Are they open to me? Am I like having lots of fun? Is the conversation free? You know, this girl, she's Iraqi, she's marrying a Greek guy. So there were loads of like traditional dances and stuff that they were like, come up, like get involved. And so we're like, you know what I mean? It was much more, it was really interesting. It was just a lot more engaging. And I guess like, because everyone kind of knew each other and it was smaller as well. Yeah, it was super fun, even though, as I say, the budget, I mean, must have been pretty low.
Well, this is the thing. Like, if I didn't have, if we weren't able to kind of put aside as much money as we did, like some of the wedding overlapped into like the couple of months after the wedding, because we paid for the wedding and then we went on honeymoon to Barbados and then we moved house and then we had to pay all these other fees. It got very expensive because I moved cities. So now in terms of weddings, they can get very expensive. So if I had to kind of do a wedding on a budget, I would just really scale back everything. For me, I would just go to a restaurant and just pay for everybody's meal and then have like 50 people. We go to a really nice registry office. There's some beautiful registry offices that are like £500, can fit 100 people. You can go there, go to a restaurant. Your wedding costs like £5,000. Bam, you're done. So I would have done something like that. I don't like it when people don't have money and decide they're going to do the big thing and then they cut ridiculous corners to the point that it's a joke. And I know people have gone to weddings like that to the point where they're like, the food, people were getting like a spoonful of every dish because they're like, there wasn't like stuff like that. And I'm like, just don't do it. Just don't invite. You can't have 200 people if you can only really afford to feed 50 people well.
I definitely agree. Okay, final thing though, about wedding lists. Again, I realize we've like totally gone off the subject.
We completely went on a tangent, completely.
But with wedding lists, okay, so there's a question. I personally don't feel this about anyone I know, but a few of my friends have mentioned kind of, I guess, low grade is the wrong way to describe, but I guess pared down weddings, that they kind of felt like the couple were being opportunistic because their wedding list was all about basically like filling their home with like designer goods. And like you know what I mean? And so the inequality between those things kind of irked people, I don't know. Do you have a view on this?
I do have a view on that. It really depends. Like, if someone wants to have a low grade wedding, as much as I might be frustrated about it, that's their choice. And they might be like, because our wedding is low grade, we expect you to give more money to gifts because you're not spending that much money to come. Not pity, but you're not spending that much money to come. It's not some big fancy do. Like, we just want the presents and we want the money. So do you, if that works for you? I wouldn't, because my chest is way too high. My mother and father are still alive and they would die of shame and embarrassment if I did that. Like the Caribbean pride would be way too high. My dad would have been like, why didn't you just come and ask for money? If you didn't have the money, just come and ask for the money, because this is a joke. Like I couldn't do it. But through all those experiences, from planning my own wedding, not even planning, we got a wedding planner because my husband was just like, he didn't want me to stress out. He was just like, we're going to hire a wedding planner, because he was just like, I can't deal with the crazy. He was like, you're going to get crazy. I'm not dealing with it. He was like, that'd be my gift to you. I'll get a wedding planner. I'm just like, and I was like, it don't come from the wedding budget? He was like, no, it doesn't come from the wedding budget. He'll just put it on top. I said, babe, knock yourself out. So my thing is that if you go to a wedding, people have put in a lot of money, make sure you take a decent gift, put money in the card, don't be cheap, don't turn up with an empty card, just respect the fact that people have paid for your meal and done all of these things just to make sure that you enjoy their day with them.
So, I also agree, but do you agree, guys? We want to know. So please let us know in the comments. What is sort of incorrect wedding behavior, and what would you spend your money on? Would you spend your savings on a mortgage or a marriage? Please let us know. And if you want a recap of everything we've discussed today, head on over to unitedmelaningroup.com/ES073. If you're watching on YouTube, please do not forget to like, subscribe, and most importantly, hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. We'll be back very soon talking about the relationship we have with our parents and whether that changes as we age. But until then, please wash your hands, wear your mask, keep your distance, and stay safe.